Some of us are aware of events that happen once every 25 years on the calendar. We're also aware of what is happening in 17 days. So, Graz, get us started. I know you had a great view of the eclipse. In between, you've been talking to everybody around the league. What's the latest on these top teams drafting?
Well, look, I mean, it starts at number one with the Bears, and I think the widespread expectation at this point is that they will go with USC quarterback Caleb Williams. They spent 3 days with him at his pro day a few weeks ago in L.A. They spent 2 days with him in Chicago last week when he was there for his top 30 visit. At this time, as far as we understand, he does not have any other visits scheduled. I think it would be pretty shocking at this point if it was not Caleb Williams to the Bears at number one. So where does that leave the Washington Commanders at number two? They need a quarterback. They've been doing their homework on LSU's Jayden Daniels, on North Carolina's Drake Maye, on Michigan's J.J. McCarthy. There does seem to be a consensus building around the league from people you talk to with other teams that Daniels is the guy they like, but I've been told Washington is still going through its process and hasn't made a final determination. Once they do and they make a selection, the Patriots will have a decision to make. They had Drake Maye in for a visit on Friday. They had Jayden Daniels in for a visit yesterday. If they're comfortable with both guys, then I think the likelihood is that they sit tight and take whichever one Washington doesn't take. If they are not comfortable with both guys or McCarthy, I believe that the Patriots would consider trading back. But at this point, most people you talk to seem to believe that the Patriots would like to stay put and take a quarterback.
Surely, as they kick off the Gerard Mayo era, let's bring in draft analyst Matt Miller in your latest mock of the Pats trading out of that number 3 pick with the Vikings, who then move up and take Drake Maye. How did you land there?
Yeah, and it's just like Dan said, if you don't love quarterback 3 in this class, this is a unique opportunity to trade back and get some of that draft capital that will be needed to build up a roster. I've said before, this is the worst offensive roster that I've seen in the NFL, at least on paper. There's one guy on the offensive line that you feel like is a plus starter. That's the right tackle. They don't have a number one wide receiver. They don't have Hunter Henry's a fine tight end. He's not one of these elite game-changing tight ends. So if you're New England and Caleb Williams is gone, Jayden Daniels is off the board already, I think that's where you have the conversation of, do we trade back? And unfortunately, we won't know until we're about 20 minutes into the draft in Detroit who is going to be on the board. So New England has to be very proactive about setting the table for some of these trade parameters now, so that if they don't like the quarterbacks who are there at number 3 overall, then they can make those calls to a Minnesota, to a Denver, maybe even the New York Giants as teams that would like to come up and select a quarterback.
There's been a lot of chatter about them maybe really liking McCarthy. We do know they've signed Jacoby Brissett. So Mina and Dan. Dan first. They have the luxury, obviously, a young quarterback sitting there behind Brissett. Should they take the best available quarterback at 3 or trade down and build up their roster?
If they have any of those 3 quarterbacks rated as like top 10 picks, then you have to take them. The reality is it's way easier to build your roster than it is to find an elite high-level starting quarterback in the NFL. So if any of those 3 guys, whether it's the combination of Caleb, Jayden, and JJ, or a combination of Caleb, Jayden, and Drake Maye, you take that guy. Now, here's the questions that New England has to ask themselves. Number 1, what's their realistic time frame with expectation? Do they think they're closer to winning than maybe we do? Number 2, which one of the guys do they think is going to be the actual better pro over the long haul, not just the guy that can step in right now? And then 3, which one of those quarterbacks has the least to fix or to try to, if we get this corrected, he'll become a really good pro? I still think that if New England values one of those guys highly, you take them and you figure out the rest, whether they're going to play or not in the roster afterwards.
Yeah, I think Dan's assessment of the process is completely correct. What I would do is take a quarterback based on how I feel about this top 3, because I do feel all of the top 3, Williams, Daniels, and Maye, are worthy of top 3 picks. And while we never know what the next draft is going to be like, you remember this time last year, we certainly weren't talking about Jayden Daniels this way, so many things can change. At the moment, it does look like a weaker class than this one. As far as New England and their timeline, Dan and I have talked about this. We both feel that they should sit that quarterback, so I think it aligns with if Maye was the pick. You play Brissett, and then you can use the rest of your draft picks to work on building the offense. This is such a heavy wide receiver draft. I mean, there's so much talent. I also think they should be on the phone, calling the Bengals, maybe looking into a T. Higgins trade, calling San Francisco about Brandon Ayuk. Then you can focus on the offensive line. But whatever you do, you can take your quarterback. You don't have to play him immediately because you do have Jacoby Brissett, who's one of the better better backups in the NFL.
Yeah, the mocks have Arizona taking Marvin Harrison Jr., who so many people regard as the best non-quarterback prospect in the draft. That receiver right there at number 4. Mina, should they make that move or should they try to get a haul in a trade?
I have gone back and forth on this one because the pick would probably be similar, or pardon me, the haul would probably be similar to what San Francisco did when they went up and got Trey Lance a few years ago. And it would probably be with Minnesota, frankly. And there are so many needs. I mean, Matt outlined some of them, their needs at high, expensive positions. I would also add interior offensive line and defensive tackle. This roster has more needs in areas where they're comfortable. But at a certain point, those picks have to become players, and Arizona at pick 4 has the opportunity to get a truly special wide receiver. And, Dan, hear me out on this. Because of the trade they did last year, you have the extra first rounder. You got 2/3,
Right.
so you already have draft capital to work on building out your team.
Yeah, number one, the most important thing this season for the Cardinals is hitting on a bunch of those 6 top 90 picks. Number 2, getting Kyler Murray back on track. Okay, we could sit here and say all we want. Mina just pointed out, the only way to get a rebuild successful is not just acquiring a ton of picks. It's getting really good players. Okay? The only way to get that done is to make sure that Kyler Murray starts playing at that, hey, I was the number 1 pick level in the NFL. Get him a wideout. All right, we don't get too cute with this if you're Monty Awesome Fort, their general manager. We often say, well, trade back. Well, who are you going to trade back with? And what happens if that team becomes really good next year? And all of a sudden, you've got the 29th pick of the draft. You're not going to improve your team that much, that quickly. Marvin Harrison Jr. is rare. He's a very unique talent. I think you sit there and say, let's not overthink this. We made the trade last year to get ourselves in this situation. Go help Kyler Murray and go get a star wide receiver at 4. Stay there. Do not get cute.
Mel Kiper Jr. has LA taking a receiver with that 5th overall pick. Somebody that so many love, Malik Neighbors out of LSU. Dan, the man, should the Chargers make that pick or trade down and fill some of those holes?
I think the Chargers make the pick, but I do not believe it's wide receiver. I do believe that they rebuild this offensive line and build through the line of scrimmage. That's what has been the identity of Jim Harbaugh everywhere he's been, at San Diego, at Stanford, certainly with the San Francisco 49ers, and then at Michigan. I know that the Chargers don't have a ton of talent on the outside. Coach Harbaugh believes that as long as he's good at the line of scrimmage, he can make everything else better with a superstar quarterback, and that's what he has. If you're going to talk to me about trading back, I'm willing to consider that, but I think that the line of demarcation for me is Tennessee sits at 7. They're more than likely going to take an offensive lineman, and then the Jets are at 10. I think they entertain offensive line pretty consistently as well. So if you're the Chargers and think about trading back, you can't really go past 10 because then you're getting to maybe who could be the 3rd or 4th offensive lineman in the first round.
The 3rd or 4th offensive lineman in this draft is still pretty good, though. That's the thing,
Sure.
Dan. That's why I am slightly leaning trade. But first of all, Arizona would have to not do a trade in this scenario. So you'd be getting a major package. And similarly to Arizona, actually eerily similar when you look at the needs, there's just so many positions that they have to address on both sides of the football. I mean, offensive line, both center and right tackle, I think are areas of need in addition to receiver. But that whole defense quietly has really been in need of a rebuild to get younger and faster. And I think if you were able to trade down and get a number of picks, you'd have the opportunity to do so with your new coaching staff. This is a tricky one. These are all tricky ones, but this one's really tricky. If they didn't have so many needs, I think I would probably vote against it. But unlike Arizona, they don't have that extra first and extra 3rd rounder in this draft, so they could really use the ammunition.
Yeah.